It is Coffee with Christina today, and
I only have my water.
there you go. I have a special guest. Her name is Dee Bills, and what I want to do is I want to just share a little bit about not maybe, I want to share why I asked Dee Bills to join us. So I met Dee Bills 2 years ago, and I was looking for help with an area in my practice that I just wasn't measuring up. Like all of my peers, I would go to these meetings, I would run panels, and a lot of my peers had, when we would talk about arrivals, they would talk about how, 95% of their patients show up for their appointments. And I just was like, every time I would hear that, I felt like such a failure because 2 years ago, I was killing it. My schedule was 100% full. We were bringing in tons of patients through our marketing efforts, but maybe I might be being gracious if I say 80% were arriving. So sometimes I even had numbers like, it was sickening. It was like 78 or 77%. So in terms of volume, like we would have 900 patients on the schedule, and I'd be like, great week. And at the end of the week, we'd only help maybe 700 or 750. And I bonus my staff on productivity. So they always would end up at the end of the week, they would go in having this really full schedule. And then at the end of the week, they would end up from a production standpoint around 75%. And it was frustrating to them because it wasn't that we lost patients. It wasn't that we weren't giving good care, because eventually, like when we would look at numbers, we would look at, did they complete their program? They did complete their program. They just took a lot longer. And so the therapist was there during the week, ready to treat the patient, but the patient, they would cancel, and they would call and maybe cancel on the same day for like, you name it. We probably had like 35 different reasons that a patient would cancel. And so because the schedule was full, we didn't know who was going to cancel. So we couldn't put the patient in. And so their programs just dragged out. But if you were to look at from an efficiency standpoint, we really weren't efficient at treating our patients. And my therapists were always disappointed at the end of the week. So I think it was through a webinar, believe it or not, like this, that I got on with Dee, and I was like, I need help. And so I put all my directors and I had everyone in my front desk go through her program. And at the end of the program, we were always above 90%, 93%. And then she would have this special award day. She called it a pink unicorn day, right? Mm-hmm. And if all of the people that you booked arrived, you would get a pink unicorn award. So I started buying pink unicorn pens, and she would send stuff through the mail. And it just became like this really fun thing. And for us, it changed everything in our practice in terms of it took the anxiety out of just knowing that, our schedules are still full. So that's the really good thing. But knowing that the people are going to arrive and my therapists are going to get bonus because, they're always willing to treat the patients. So that was a big thing. Recently, like all of us, so we're plugging along doing great. And then, COVID hit, right? So COVID hit, and, we had to get back to normal, and we all have our stories. And I feel like, we've sort of all come back to the new normal type of thing. But the one thing that I noticed at the end of September was that we had become very, what would be the word? I think I wrote something down. Complacent. Very, we got very lax about, we didn't want to like rock any boats or push too hard. And so some of these really successful actions, we started dropping out. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing was, I had all the information and the training materials, and we were like, that's it. We're getting the program back in. And so that's why I thought, like when I talk to other owners, I feel like we're always talking about you know, compliance and getting our patients to arrive, and, you know, how do we train our front staff? And you know what, just like in just asking Dee to be co-host at this event this week, I felt like we already got so many things back in, because a lot of it, what I feel more than anything, it's sort of the mindset with which you look at something.
Yeah.
And so this is Dee Bills. She's right there. And she is with Front Office Guru. And I wanted to start with a question. So no one prepared us for COVID or the lockdown, right?
Right.
And probably a lot of us, just like me, I don't think I'm alone, let some of our policies slip out.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, I would say across the country, even all my clients, I would say that was the challenge for all of us, right? Like, you know, you've got this virus and you've got the news telling you, oh my God, don't go anywhere. And so a big thing was Mondays. I don't know if you went back and looked at all of your schedules, if Mondays were in March and April were like your big cancellation days. I know that the day after the president said he's locking down the country, we had more cancellations than I think we've ever had in our clinic, which is so freaks everybody out, right? So we weren't alone. And you know, I think it really came down to, what do we say to our patients? How do we challenge them? How do we really manage them and their fear at the same time without, you know, nobody wanted to be a jerk, right? Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Like that was a big thing. You didn't want to be a jerk. You didn't want to come across as, hey, you can't cancel that appointment today. And so I think that became a habit from March through probably, say with a lot of my clients, I had to really start pushing that back in early June. Like, okay, guys, can't do this anymore. You got to push it in. It's okay. It's okay to hold that line with your patients. So yeah, I think that's across the country. All medical offices went through that. Even veterinary offices went through it.
Right. So one of the things that we talked about, and this is something that you had discussed with us very early on, is it's what does the front office person consider themselves? Are they a receptionist or a patient care coordinator?
Yeah. So, you know, I would say that, you know, years ago when Mike and I started, you know, really pushing the practice and working on really helping more people, we did the same thing that most people do. We hired medical receptionists. And what I found when I started really looking at definitions and defining positions was, when I went to hire a receptionist, I got just that. And when you think of a receptionist, what do you think of?
Answering the phone.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I really started looking at things, what I really started looking at is really patient compliance starts at your front desk. If your front desk doesn't garner that patient compliance, if they don't demand that respect and earn it, then that actually affects your whole practice. It affects how leads come in and get handled. It affects everything across the board once you sign that patient on. And so we started really looking at, okay, they need to be a patient care coordinator, because what their job is really about is coordinating the schedule and demanding schedule control so that the PTs can do their job, or the OTs can do their job, which is treat your patients.
So if you were picking like a statistic to measure their effectiveness, what would you pick?
Ooh, so there's 5. It's a really hard one. The front desk, you know, your PTs have multiple stats too, but if you look at the front desk, you know, the big one that most owners harp on is arrival rate, right? That's the big one. That was your button, right? That was a lot of people's button that year. And, you know, arrival rate is simply a measurement of how well your patients understand that they either need to show up or they need to give you enough notice so that you have the ability to control the schedule, which is helping more people get in. And so arrival rate's always the first one that owners look at, and it has to be a clean arrival rate. Another one is visits kept per week. So if you look at percent prescribed or visits kept per week, you have a PT. So we have Graham down here, and let's say he puts the patient 3 times a week for 2 weeks and 2 times a week for 4 weeks. The question really is that patient actually scheduled and arriving for what the PT prescribed, right? So that's visits kept per week. And if we're not managing that in the front office, look, our PTs get busy and they're busy treating. right? And so if the front office isn't measuring that stat, then we have a problem. And both of those stats, you and I were talking about this last week. We got into this long conversation about it, right? A lot of times those get convoluted. And a lot of people say, well, as long as Mrs. Smith cancels today, but reschedules for tomorrow, I'm not going to call that a cancellation because she rescheduled. Well, in reality, that's your visits kept per week stat. But if she canceled today, she kept you from theoretically being able to help somebody else. So keeping those two stats clean and separate while understanding they both still play a role on schedule in managing your schedule is a key to your success. Then you get into schedule utilization. I have 100 spots on my schedule. What percentage of spots were filled? So let's say you were talking about, a couple years ago, you had 900 spots available to you on the schedule. Your team was filling those up. Woohoo, that's exciting.
Right.
But then you're having all these cancellations. So schedule utilization is really how well are we filling those spots, but also how well are we keeping them full, because that's the only way we help people, right? And then you get into lead conversion, right? I have 100 calls that come in this week. How many of those calls were actually scheduled for an evaluation? That's the hardest one to track, because in most cases, you're either managing like one of the phone systems that's out there that tracks calls that come in. Somebody has to then manage that to see who was converted, or your staff have to be really honest. Yep, I took 12 calls. I only converted 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's how we as owners understand that, whether or not our marketing is working, or whether it's working, but our front office isn't understanding. And then finally, it's collections. Do I collect what I'm supposed to collect every day? So those are the 5. If I had to pick one, that's debatable, right? Because you and I talked about that last week. Think about your arrival rate. You can lose a lot of money if patients are canceling at the last minute or no showing because you can't refill that spot with somebody else. And if you're looking at it as an owner, we look at things as owners in terms of collections, dollars, right? But our staff have to look at it as the number of people they helped, or the percentage of people they're helping, for it to really be, in my opinion, effective. So arrival rate's a big one, but if I lose X number of visits here and there, I'm losing money. But if I don't convert the leads, so that lead conversion is equally important, because let's say I get 10 leads that come in this week, but I only convert 5, and my average plan of care would bring in, we'll just go with $1,000 because it's easier. I'm essentially every week potentially losing a $5,000 plans of care because of those other 5 patients they didn't convert. So for your front office, there's really 2 huge indicators: arrival rate and leads converted. And then the others are just as important.
Right, right. And the big one that we've been really focusing on, because I think that it's easier to get, like, I always look at arrivals, it's sort of a polite thing. Can people be polite and mannerly? And I found that in the beginning, they were great. They were polite and mannerly, and they gave us the 24 hours notice, but then they didn't get in their prescribed visits. Or visits kept. And so a lot of our focus has been on how do we talk to a patient to help them understand just how important it is to keep the visits. Why is it important? Why, like, so my mantra has been like, frequency matters. I don't know if you want to speak around that. Like, what are some things how can the front, maybe what does the therapist mindset have to be? And also, how can the front support and help with compliance in terms of
that one's huge.
Frequency.
Yep. So, again, I have a PT and they're prescribing visits. So in regards to the clinical side, you've got to sell that plan of care. You really have to take that patient through a sales process, which you and I were talking about last week, right? If I can't sell you on that plan of care, you're going to walk up front and the front office is already behind in handling that, because you're going to start throwing resistance at them, right? So it really all starts on the first phone call. As a PCC or a patient care coordinator, if I don't handle you properly, if I don't put the right level of control in and start to educate you on what I need from you, if I don't have the right tools and data to collect that gives me that ability to handle you and make sure you show up for the eval, okay, we can have problems there with patients dropping off before they ever get started.
What do you think? So on that first phone call, when you like say, you know, what do you think the front can do? So they haven't even met the therapist.
Yeah.
What can they do
Yeah.
that would help ensure the patient shows up?
Yeah, so that's something that I spent quite a lot of years on. In Virginia, there's not a lot of doctors that refer to private PT practices because they have their own. And so being able to handle all those, you know, we did all this marketing years ago on Facebook ads. And so we got a lot of cold traffic. And so we learned really quickly that cold traffic's way different than that patient that's been to you before. And so they really have to develop a relationship on that first phone call. And if you think about your standard first phone call with any medical practice, it's like, good afternoon, Dr. So-and-so. Yes. Are you a current patient or a new patient? Okay. I could get you on the 15th at 9 a.m. Okay, great. So bring your insurance card and we'll see you then. Click. Right? There's no relationship there. There's no, hey, how's it going? Learning about them. And so I've created a whole process basically that helps the front office staff manage that call in a way that guides that patient into the practice where they feel like they've developed a connection before you ever get off that call. So by the time I'm done with that patient, whether they reached out on Facebook or they're a past patient that I've never met before, or a doctor referred them and I'm calling that referral, there's a process to follow that really develops that relationship. And you're looking at relationship, you're looking at building trust. One of the things we don't know when we're on that first phone call is how many people you've seen for this problem, right? So I have to build your trust so that you're willing to work with me and buy in. You're willing to show up. And then the other one is communication, right? Have you ever called a patient, a brand new person that came in as a referral, and you're like, hi, this is Dee, I'm calling from Latin Sports Therapy. And it's like, hello, are you there? And it's so awkward. And by the way, when that happens, your patient care coordinators that throws them hard because it's like, we're all social beings. I want to be like, hey, Christina, how's it going? And you and I in our conversation, hey, how's it going? Even our texts are like that, right? But so we have to build that from the first phone call because people like to talk about themselves. And so once you can get them talking about themselves and you're welcoming them in, and your PCCs learn that process, what happens is by the time they're done with that call, regardless of where the person was in that need for care, everybody understands, I have a problem and I need to come and see you. And so when I go to sell that eval appointment for 3 o'clock today or 9 o'clock tomorrow, the patient's like, you can get me in that early? Heck yeah. And so to be honest with you, like you asked earlier to answer that question, it really starts on that first phone call and everything there leads to that point where by the time they show up to have that PT or OT eval or speech eval, the patient feels like they're a part of your family already. And that's the goal. They walk in the door and it's like, hey, Graham, it's so good to see you. He just popped back up on my screen, so I'm gonna pick on him. And so, and he's like, he feels like he's part of it, right? Have you ever gone to a doctor's office and you walk in, everybody's on the phone, you're brand new, you're like, you know, it's awkward. You don't even feel like you're supposed to be there. They slap a clipboard in front of you. They keep doing what they're doing and there's no personality. And, you know, a big thing I'm about is customer service, right? Because it's never about a one-time visit or a one-time plan of care. I learned this from the veterinary industry a long time ago. You want people to come back to you for the entire rest of their life for every injury and problem that you have. And if you don't set that up, I think it's a lot harder to manage. So that's to answer your question. Yeah, that's what the front office can do. I spend a lot of time on that in my programs and my training. That's not one of the programs you did when you worked with me. So,
I'm writing it down that I missed that, but we need to
that was the other program that back then when there were 2 options. Now there's not 2 options. Now it's all one program because I realized that, hey, you can't have one without the other, right? You can't have cookies without milk or whatever. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I just want to validate 2 things from my years in the industry is the idea of a PCC, right? Patient care being the big button. What I find is if you don't do something like that title or something similar, then it removes them from the activity. because if they are a patient care coordinator, they're involved in the patient care, which means they're involved in the treatment of the patient, which means they're not dissimilar in some ways to a therapist. Again, clinically, there's a big gap, but they're not like the other thing. Oh, like, oh, they're there, we're here, we're different, we're separate. No, I'm the care overseer. Oh,
yeah.
It's status. So I love that you made that point. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And the other thing too, one quick story from a recent person I worked with. We brought in a woman for, I think it was maybe the marketing role. And her background was all hostess. It was all customer service hostess, like concierge at the hotel kind of a person, right? Right. A high level of communication, great communication skills, upbeat, smile, approachable, all that you want in like that first, I think hotel, non-conservative hotel, hey, how are you? Or like in Cheers, Norm, right? Like you said, the friendship, the friendliness thing. And we had her come in and it changed our viewpoint. That one interview changed our viewpoint. Like, well, we don't need her for marketing, but gosh, how about the front desk? Well, she'd be overpaid at the front desk, but what is that thing? And we couldn't quite, and you think you named it, Dee, which is great. What is that other thing? What is that person that's high-level customer service, high-level communication, all about the care of the communication, but not, like, it was almost a different thing for us.
Yeah.
And we saw the value there of like, oh, okay, receptionist, not just a receptionist, which means receive.
Yeah.
It's the customer service, it's the communication, a little bit of the sales. So anyway, I wanted to validate that with the story. Keep going.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
No, that's, James, you're totally right. And, it's interesting though, and this is where, okay, here's a great example. And Christina and I have talked about this before, right? You want somebody who's personal. I call it I never want the itch, to be polite, behind the glass. I want that person that's like, hey, how's it going today? That develops that relationship, that can really communicate with their patients. But the other side of that is true as well. If you listen to your front desk, and this is a great action for owners and managers to do, just wander through your front office and listen, right? Mama taught me to be super respectful, right? My mom and my dad, my grandmother, I would have gotten beaten for not being respectful to another person. But sometimes they confuse being respectful or being nice with managing the patient. And so what happens is, oh, James, you can't make it today. Okay, no problem. Would you like to come in tomorrow? And so instead of handling that situation, I'm like, here, James, let me give you control. You can decide if you want to come in tomorrow. And the true patient care coordinator, their job is truly to be in control of the patient's path. It's not about, hey, would you like to come in? Hey, what's a good time for you? It's about knowing, okay, Christina, you need to get in. Here's your plan of care. We're going to schedule you out. I have this or this. And you're like, I'll take this. And I say, okay, great. I have you scheduled for this. And then I move right on. And so it is about that super friendly person, but at the same time, they really stay in control of that path. They don't let the patient take control because, as we've all learned, doesn't matter if you're in New York, Virginia, California, Alaska, if you let the patient have control, they're going to eat you alive like a group of piranhas, right? Because it just becomes, oh, there's my opening. Okay, so I can only come every third Thursday. If the sky is purple, there's got to be a rainbow. There can't be any rain. It's like they start getting into all these crazy details and you're like, okay, this did not go well, right? So it is about control too. If we don't stay in control as a patient care coordinator, and that's the coordinator part, right? That's the, okay, you're supposed to be 3 times a week, Christina. Let's get you in for all 3 times. Oh, well, life is busy. My kids are playing soccer again. And I'm like, I totally understand, but we still need to get you in, right? There's no option. And it's not because we're not caring or we're the itch behind the window. It's because we're like, hey, we got to get you in. We got to handle you. We've got to get you that care that you deserve because, look, it doesn't happen magically. So
I think that if I were to say, what did we work the most on, besides, the whole outline, but it's that, like I wrote down again, it's almost taking out of the habitual talking, like, would you like to, like what the classic is, would you like to, they call it cancel. Would you like to rebook your appointment? No, I'm coming in Thursday anyways. And it's that balancing how you say it, because I feel like, you know, a lot of us have cancellation policies, and sometimes the staff can get focused on, you know, they're like, well, what's your policy? Do you charge $50? And it's always like, listen, yes, the money is there, but if the focus becomes like, well, you know, I don't want to have to charge you that $50.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like that was probably, you know, like that sounds very different. You know, if you keep your appointment, I won't have to charge you that $50. It's like it's all focused on the money,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being focused on
Yeah.
the patient. You know, you're supposed to come in 3 times a week, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you think about it, the true product, well, you know, if you look at a CEO's product, their product is paid completions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a CEO or the owner of a company, your product is paid completions. So if you look at the national average, successful completions is about 60%. I don't know about you, but that's like playing roulette with your ability to recover.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at your staff, the true product of all of your staff is people helped, and
Mm-hmm.
how you measure that is dependent upon the department, right? So a PT's percentage of successful completions is a part of that owner's stat, but the front office's ability to manage visits kept per week, manage arrival rate, and you're doing it out of help, right? So when you change the mindset from, I just got to do this, or it's this way, or you're going to have to pay a fee, to, hey, I'd really like to help you avoid having to deal with this. Or the only way we can help you is to get you in to see the PT. So this is my job, and my job is to nag the heck out of you until you schedule all of your appointments, right?
Mm-hmm.
They feel better about it, because at the end of the day, they know that arrival rate is simply a measurement of the percentage of people that we helped avoid the missed visit fee. Or visits kept per week is the percentage of people that we helped reach toward recovery. And so when you put your staff's focus, all of your staff, on the percentage or the number of people they're helping in a week, it sounds a lot better. And you as the owner can still look at paid completions, you can look at collections, you can look at numbers, but your staff are looking at the numbers toward helping people. And when you change that mindset, it's very successful because they feel more comfortable about it.
Yeah, we even, after working with you, like I try to always, rather than saying, you know, we did, you know, 900 visits last week, I always say we helped 900 people. What's my goal? I want to help 25% more people.
Yeah.
Why do I want to do that? You know, and I'm always like I'm always trying to say to them, well, why do I want to help more people? Because, you know, people need our help. You know, people are out there, they're getting addicted, they're, you know, having unnecessary surgeries. Nobody wants to right now have surgery and end up in a hospital, and they don't know what to do. And sometimes they even go and get the wrong help. So we want to be there to help them. I was thinking about this, when you first start working with front offices, like getting a front office person to agree that compliance matters or that frequency matters, like getting them to sort of overcome and see that it's really that it is that important. Like how do you help people change their viewpoint on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, it was something I realized a long time ago with my staff. For those of you that don't know, I am a PT, so I have a really good background in understanding the physical therapy side of things and an owner. So I understand the owner side of things, but I also managed my front desk. And one of the things I realized was I could give them a lot of stuff, right? Okay, so spreadsheet, you've got to use this, and here's a script, and you have to use that. But in order to really get any front office team to buy in, they have to understand the why of what they're doing. And so again, if you keep all of the whys focused on helping patients and helping them to better help their patients, you tend to be more successful because they see it, right? And so there's a why behind it. All of us went to PT school. You would not do an anterior mob if you didn't have a reason why you were doing an anterior mobilization, or you guys, you know, you wouldn't use this technique or that technique if you didn't understand the why, right? So the same applies to your front office. If they don't understand why they're doing something and you're just like, oh, here's this script, I got it off the internet, it's totally amazing, it's the best thing ever, 3 weeks later, you're going to come back and they're not using it. And they're not as, it's not that they think you're stupid. It's not that they think you had a bad idea. It's truly that they're like, well, I feel like whatever I'm doing works, right? And so you have to teach them the why behind what they're doing and how that helps. And that's a big part of both of my programs and how I do it, because again, like you said, they're going to look at me and they're like, oh my God, the owner's making me do this. I must not be good at what I do. So I also teach the owners how to have that conversation with their staff before they start with me, so that they know that I'm all about them. It's not about the owner side for me. I know you will do well if your staff does well. So there's that side of it. And then the other side of it, which we talked about last week, is the stats, right? Mm-hmm. In order for your front office to really see that they're winning, they have to track their own stats. If you track them and present them to them, it has totally different meaning than if you have them track and graph their own statistics every day. And if they're not tracking it every day, they're going too long before they can make a correction. So I would say both of those things, the why and tracking their own production, is the key for all staff success.
When, you know, one of the things that we struggle with a bit is that, you know, if when we hear them not using the best communication with a patient, what do you find is the best way to then approach the staff member and work with them to change the way they're talking with the patient?
Well, that's a good question. There's several key components to that. First, it's what you do in your hiring process, right? You have to weed out the people that aren't going to be able to use the right scripting or naturally aren't very well behaved. And I mean that politely, but look, I put on my best hat when I come in to see an owner, but what do I do when I'm talking to the rest of the team? Does the rest of the team interview them, or do you just hire them, right? And we put our front office staff through more hiring loopholes and hoops to jump through than we probably do our clinical staff, because we have to make sure they can learn, right? So that's the first thing. The next step in that is training. If you don't train your front office staff, you can't expect them to be successful. I'm sorry, they didn't go to school for this. Many of them fell into this position. They're really good people. They want to do well, but naturally, like I said earlier, mom and dad taught me to be a nice person, and my natural inclination is to be like, oh, Christina, it's okay. I totally understand. Would you like to reschedule? Because again, I want to be nice, right? So it's about training them not only in the why, but the good scripting. So that requires drilling, which you and I have spent plenty of time doing. You have to drill, right? A professional athlete does not go into a game without spending many hours the week before drilling. I'll use soccer just because my kids all played soccer. They got to hit the net in a certain angle, right? Over and over again. I got to pass it. You know, my son used to have mastered the throw in so that the guy that was running down the middle could just nail it right in the net, right? That's just how they do it. And so the same has to apply to your front desk. If you only get in or only get out what you put in, right? So if you don't drill with them, if they're not drilling regularly, there's your problem. And so it's a lot easier to approach them when all of those things are in place before you go to correct them. But if you want to know how I correct people, first of all, somebody is always there listening for a certain amount of time. So let's say I don't do this anymore. Marie is our moving up in the world. So it's Miriam actually now who's doing this. And they put them through some training in the front office. And then they put them out on the floor and they let them do it. And unless they really are flubbing it, and we're talking like they're getting really upset and they're going to yell at a patient, which should never happen, nobody's going to step in. We're going to let you make the mistake or whatever. And we're going to pull you aside as soon as it's over. And it's kind of like, okay, Christina, so let's talk about that interchange. And you're like, yeah, that didn't go so well. Okay, great. What happened there? Well, I gave her full control. Okay, great. How would you say it differently? And you're like, well, I would say it this way. I have this or this versus what would you like? I say, okay, great. So let's drill it through a few minutes. And so I say to you, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't come in at that time. Okay, great. No problem. I have this or this, right? And then we drill it a few times. You're successful. And I'm like, okay, putting you back into the game. And I put you back into the game and we're good to go. And don't get me wrong. I know this is hard for smaller practices and when it's a single-handing owner, many of my clients are single-handing owners, but part of my job is to teach you that you need to train your front office staff so that you can trust that you have patients to treat, and eventually you don't have to single hand. Did it take us a while? Sure. I started with 3 people in our clinic, not me. It was Mike, PCC's, well, we'll just call her receptionist. And I say Eeyore now. I had Eeyore at my front desk, and we had a PTA. And now we're at 20 some staff. And so it took time. It had to find the right people, had to use the right processes. But if you invest the time, then you can do what my husband's doing, which is a month working for a totally different company while our team runs the practice. And, you know, that may not be your thing either. You may want to treat for the rest of your life, but imagine if you could treat without having to constantly have to go up front and correct your staff.
No, I really like that. And I wrote down, like, sometimes it's just, you know, you want to do the re-drilling with the staff, but it's like you're nervous about them getting upset. So I like the idea of saying, like, you know, all of our inclination is to be really nice to people, and being really nice is, would you, could you, do you want, what day works for you, what time works for you. So I really like that. The other thing that we struggle with a bit sometimes is, you never know, you know, no one ever says, there's not like blinkers going off, patient's going to get upset blinkers, you know, to warn you that a patient is going to blow a gasket.
Yep.
So I always find, you know, I sort of have the,
it's true.
I have this rule that if the patient left upset, you know, we should like I try to say, okay, if the patient, like, they freaked out and, you know, they and then you say, well, what happened? And they say, all I did was ask him for his copay, and he like flipped out on me and stormed out of the room. And I'm always like, all right. And I'm like, well, why? Well, because it said here that he had a copay. And I'm like, well, you know, like, let's look at that. So, like, you know, so the way I've been handling it is going like, okay, when the patient flips out, it really means that we're like in 2 different planets. Yes. Like, they thought one thing, we thought one thing, and then we're pushing to be right. Like, no, your copay is $50. And they're going, no, I don't have a copay. And rather than taking the deep breath. So maybe you could help us with, like, some of my issues been like, how do you, when my staff always feel that they were right. They did everything right. I was calm. I was this, I was that. And I'm like, I know, but they left, and they're going to, like, literally write a bad review about us. And it's so not us. So.
Yeah. So there's so many sides to that, but it's true. Look, first of all, let's all be real. Nobody likes to be wrong. Nobody likes to be told that they're wrong, right? I always tell PCCs that, look, anytime a patient gets upset, it's like you said, it just is saying they don't understand something, right? But here's a good example, right? So you've stubbed your toe or burned your finger before, right? Right. So when you stub your toe or burn your finger, is your husband like mine? He like jumps to try to help you pretty quickly, or he might respond like, oh my God, are you okay? Or even a friend might do that. Like, oh, are you okay? Or they try to solve your problem, or they try to jump to help you. And the reality is, you have to have your moment. I like to call it, you just got to stand there. If your patient freaks out, don't freak out with them. You just got to stand there and wait and wait them out. Sometimes they find out they have a $5,000 deductible and they've met $0 and it's going to cost them $120 per visit. And they like have to do that, like jumping, like they burned their finger or stubbed their toe around like they got to have that swear, stomp, kind of moment, or maybe they just get shocked. And that's usually staff, all of our staff, most of us, we stop because we're like, oh my God, what do I do? It's not like I could have a conversation with my husband privately and be like, hey, what's going on? This is a patient, right? And they're standing in my waiting room with 12 other patients there. So the first thing they have to do is just chill out. Let the patient recognize it's a moment, recognize that it always means that somebody doesn't understand something. And then, so I'll use you as an example. Let's say you're having your moment because I told you that it'll be $50 today, and you're thinking in your head, I was going to bill you, right? Because that's pretty common. First of all, that means that
we don't bill anybody.
No, I understand that. But think about this, just like I said with other medical practices.
They thought, right.
In patients' minds, they associate you with every other medical practice out there. So if they think that they have to wait before their appointments all the time, they're going to show up late for their appointments. If they think that you're going to bill them just like everybody else, you get sucked into all the other doctor's offices that don't bill at the time of service. And so all that is that there's lacking patient education. Somebody didn't follow a process, somebody didn't educate a patient, and it puts you in this situation where the patient is freaking out. So first of all, you just got to remain calm and recognize, okay, something's not right here. They don't understand. And then you wait, and eventually you calm down, right? Eventually you're going to come down off your complaining high, right? And then I'm going to say to you, I understand. So let's say you were like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to pay $5,000. I don't have $5,000. My first thing once you calm down is, okay, Christina, you know what? I totally understand, right? Those words tend to de-escalate a person. Doesn't matter who they are. You can do this on your wife or your husband. I totally understand. You got to repeat out what they said, because remember, it's about that relationship. I understand you're concerned about the $5,000 deductible, right? And usually that'll build some agreement with you, because you're like, yeah, I'm really concerned about that. Okay, no problem. And then I then have to recognize, okay, she just doesn't understand. Let me take you back through what we should have explained to you at the eval. We collect at the time of service. This is what we're going to be collecting from you. Do you have any questions about that? Right? So it kind of gives you that freedom to go, wait a minute, so you're not like every other doctor's office out there. No, we're not. We'll collect at the time of service. And then here's the thing. A lot of our staff get nervous. They have that motor mouth. They start, do you feel like you need a payment plan? Or maybe, they can't, they just got to chill. Just answer the question, right? Usually that will de-escalate. But I can tell you as an owner, if this happens, like you said, and the patient stomps out, and now you're trying to figure it out, you have to work backwards with your staff. I can tell you that 95% of the time, 98% of the time, our patients are good people. They're all suffering in pain. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in pain, I'm an itch. You know, like I said earlier, I'm not a happy person when I have a headache or my neck hurts or something. And so we have to recognize that and be patient with our patients, because until about visit 5 or 6, when they tell you, oh my God, I just love you. And you're like, I thought you hated me, right? It's pain talking prior to that. So you start pulling strings, right? So, okay, let's work backwards. Do we have a signed financial agreement with this patient? And they start pulling up at the account and they're like, oh, no, right. There's a confusion, right? Or, you know, I use this in my missed visit policy and my cancellation program. If it's not well laid out and well explained to the patient, who is at fault when the patient cancels? You are, right? Because let's be real, I'm a patient. I don't want to own my mistakes. I don't want to accept the fact no other doctor's office expected me to call them, right? Because most people don't hold you accountable. So a big thing to know is that 98% of the problems you have with patients, you created. Doesn't matter if you're a PT or a patient care coordinator, you created them. You created the monsters. I have this cute little slide in all my webinars, and I'm like, right? The other 2% are just jerks, no matter what you do, no matter who you work with. They're just a jerk, right? They're that mean girl in school or that nasty guy that you want to punch in the face every time you see him, and nobody could get along with them. But the rest of the population, you created that on some level. You didn't recognize they were in pain, and you started fighting with them about what they owe instead of figuring out that they didn't understand. And so it really is about training your staff. It's about finding people that want to learn. That's first of all. If I could give any owner advice, regardless if you ever do my programs or not, the first thing you have to do is find people that want to learn. Because if they don't want to learn, if they come to you from another PT practice and they're like, I know everything, and you're like, okay, but I'm going to invest in an education for you. I'm going to train you up for the first 3 months and make sure that you know our systems. And they're like, oh, well, I have my own systems. There's your first problem.
Right.
Okay. I usually find people in retail, or as James said earlier, somebody that might have some customer service experience, but wants to learn how to be in control. So that's the first step. The second step is training. If you don't train them and invest the time, now you can do it, or you can let me do it. That's your choice. But if you don't invest the time in training your front office staff, you kind of get what they've gotten, which is they're coming either with no experience or bad habits from another practice. Oh my God, the bad habits your staff bring with them from somebody else who didn't train them, right? If you can do those two things, you will be very successful with your front office staff. And you know, it's just about that constant commitment that they're just as valuable for CEUs as your PTs are, right? Because they're the first line of contact. So they will never see the patient will never see your PT if your front office cannot manage them.
No, that's what, you know, and I want to take a minute to share, for you to share some stuff, but the best thing that I found about working with Dee is, like, I have all these great clinical programs that I put all my new staff, even if they're, you know, 10 years experienced, I have like this lineup so that all my physical therapy staff end up on the same place. And what I found by working with Dee and Front Office Guru is that I didn't have the same thing with my front office. And then I probably was a little lazy. I was a lot lazy in that I just didn't want to take the time to train them. But there's so many, I went through the training too, so that's a good thing. But the good thing was that by being able to put the staff through the training, they were able to just, that's the way our therapists could have more confidence in doing an evaluation and designing a plan of care, but the front office could. And there's like, I started taking notes, all those key things, like just the phrases never to use, how important it is to establish the rules at the very first visit, you know, so that when you go to enforce it, it doesn't feel like they go, oh yeah, I know, it's all about you caring, I know you care. And I just feel like anytime we go wrong, it's that we go, oh, I didn't really do that on the, oh, that was your sister-in-law. I didn't think I had to put her, I didn't think I had to go through the rules with your sister-in-law. I'm like, yeah, my family put them through it twice, but
you got, yeah, exactly.
I don't want to end, and I want to give some time for questions, but so a really cool thing, I want Dee to share, if she can get share screen, right? You're prepared to do that. So now, the way we did the training was I had to find a time that all my staff could meet with Dee, and we would do like a webinar like this. Dee now has a platform that I'm totally getting where you can have online access and your staff can do training at different times. So I just wanted you to share your platform.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm excited because, so we started in July and I had it as a membership, and I realized I don't like memberships. I want owners to be able to just pay one time, have access for the rest of their life of their practice, be able to grow with it. So what we did was starting on hopefully November 1st, this will all be built out. I always have these great ideas and then I have to rely, I'm not techie for those of you that were not on early, so I have to rely on somebody else. So a little bit about where I'm at. I see if it'll let me share. I'm without a mouse today. Okay, so Front Office Guru is me, but Fix Your Front Desk is my program. So I've started this actually at the same time I was working with Christina. I started creating this. It's completely online. Let's see if it'll let me. I don't know. There we go. It'll cover all the things we talked about today. So problems with scripting, problems with collections, difficulty with your arrival rate. That's a big one for all of our clinics. If you're struggling with profitability, or your front office staff just struggles handling your patients, that's a huge, huge part of what I do. There's 4 areas that we cover, really 5. Convert more leads is a big one, right? If you are spending lots of money on marketing out there on Facebook or anywhere else, that's a big part of what I make sure that you do. It is a big process. They have to learn sales. We talked about that, right? That if they can't sell, they're going to get them all scheduled. And I did a survey a couple years ago, 70 some owners, and they were estimating that they were probably losing 10 potential leads a week. If you do the math on $1,000 plan of care, that's $10,000 a week, I think, right? That's my math. So, and you do that times 52 weeks, that's $520,000 a year. So if you are, as an owner, not paying yourself what you deserve, your leads are usually your problem. The next is arrivals, right? And that's all about scheduling, schedule control, managing your patients the right way without the upsets. That's a big thing that Christina came to me for, was I want to be able to handle my arrival rate, but I also want my staff to not sound like the itch behind the window and come across the wrong way and fight with our patients. The next is schedule control. If they don't understand that they own that schedule and they don't manage that schedule, you're not gonna have a full schedule, or you're gonna have a lot of confusion, or you're gonna be seeing 10 patients at 9 o'clock and nobody at 11 o'clock. And then finally, we will cover collections in the new year. The first 3 areas are massive and they require a lot of mindset changing, and that's also what I teach in this program. Basically, when you sign up, you will, on November 1st, you will have a one-time sign up. You can pay for anywhere from levels 1 and 2 or all 3 levels. All 3 levels will cover everything that I just talked about. You as the owner or the manager in your practice can become you're basically the moderator. You get an account, a parent account, and then you go into the parent account and you would be able to go into signing manager members, and you can sign up, it says 0-4, but there's actually going to be 6 members. So you plus 5 staff members can be trained. And each person has their own account. So the cool thing with that is you can go in and see, and they're like, yeah, I watched those videos, right? You'll be able to actually check that and monitor that. This is my goal with this, is that it's the life of your practice. So I don't want to punish practices. There is a very affordable fee to expand. So if you want to expand beyond 6, if you're that 60 PCC practice, you would have that ability to do that. And we're working with practices that are large, but also smaller practices so that you can expand. Everything is set up into videos, and there's over 100 videos that they can watch. They can access any videos and all videos. I try to teach them the path that they should follow, but if they need to skip around because you're like, I need you to fix my missed visit policy and my arrivals right now, they can jump to that. You'll be able to notice and see on here. This is just a sample of my screen, like where I would be at. Basically, you have 3 options. You can sign up for a free call with me if you just want to find out a little bit more about me and what I do, if I didn't do a good job today. You can talk to me about my one-on-one coaching program like Christina did. That is roughly 16 weeks long. I'm going to kick your butt as you go through this. The newest program on November 1st is my online program. This is the one that you will have access to for the life of your practice. And you can sign up to 6 people. The cool thing is you can reassign licenses. So if James is an employee and he were to leave, Christina could take him out and add, Bill, who took over that position. So that's part of it too, so that you have access. And if you grow beyond 6, you can always reach out. I'm not gonna punish you. And then finally, the thing that I love to do is coaching. So this program will also, you can have optional group coaching for the life of your practice. It'll be very affordable, and it'll be several practices at a time. And I've done it before, and we have super fun. So that's the gist of kind of me and what's available. So hopefully that gives everybody a little bit of idea, but you can go to my website, which is www.frontofficeguru, and you can learn about both sides of things and learn about me. And hopefully I will get to know some of you.
That's so cool. Are there any, does anyone have a really burning question that they wanted to ask right now? Just speak up. Otherwise, I do encourage you, for me, I'm really excited about this new program with Dee, because we did download all the training materials, but sometimes for me, I didn't really have a good way of re-accessing it or going oh, let's retrain on this. So I just think it's just going to be so easy. She's wonderful to work with. She's helped my staff so much. So make her life easy. Anyways, I want to let you all know that we didn't have any questions, right? Next week, we have Angie, famous Angie. So it's Coffee with Angie next week. So thanks a lot, guys, for having coffee with me and Dee this week. And there she is on the bottom. Yay. All right. So have a great week, and we'll see you next week with Coffee with Angie. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.